with Darin.
Jennifer Cohen, welcome to the Super Life Podcast with me, your host, Darin Olien.
This is exciting. Oh my God, that's a wonderful intro. Are we using that because you should?
Hell yeah.
Okay, good.
Come on.
That's a great voice.
It's a one-hit wonder.
Good. I like it. It's authentic.
Yes, because you're my favorite. I
Yeah.
mean, truly, really my favorite.
He's now just mocking me because I always say, oh, this was my favorite, but I really meant it when I say it to you. I mean it with. I actually...
You lie to everyone else.
I do. I lie to everybody else. I try to be polite and cordial, and it comes out when I say the word favorite. But you are my favorite.
Life is complete right now. I can ascend.
Really? Because I think you're my favorite?
Yeah, because what else?
What else is there?
What else is there?
Nothing.
Nothing
else is there. Just me, Chaga, and
Ella.
And Ella, sorry.
And scene.
And,
Well, I'm really actually stoked to have this conversation because there's several things about it. I mean, yes, it's centered around your TED Talk, you're on children, but I think it brings up some really important points to not only children, but also society too, in how we're treating people and how, I love, maybe start off with the spit and catch.
It's so funny that you just said that. I feel like when I talked about that, I thought it would be just like like a side thing.
Yeah.
But people really like that story, and it makes sense why. It's disgusting.
It's disgusting, but it makes a point, and then
I'll tell you. Well, yeah. Let me first tell you the story.
Yeah.
So what Darin's referring to is I recently did this TED Talk on how to raise mentally strong children in a coddle culture world, and I started this talk by talking about how when I was a kid, I was bored, and being bored was like an acceptable thing. Right? Which is now not acceptable, right? Like now everyone's overscheduled, overstimulated. And, but when I was a little girl, I would go to my dad and I would go to my mom and my dad and I'd say, oh, I'm so bored. I'm so bored. And my dad would say, well, go play spit and catch, which basically is this game where I spit as high as I can in the air. And then I try to catch it with my mouth. And
how old were you at this time
I was maybe 7, 6, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, spit and catch.
22. No, joking. I was young. But what the purpose of that was to basically force me to go figure shit out on my own, right? Go figure out what to do on my own. And
it doesn't need to be elaborate.
It doesn't have to be elaborate. The idea was so what that did, and the reason why, so naturally I would go and I would try to spit and catch, and I would try it a few times, and it would get gross and messy. I'd spit on my face or it would land somewhere else. But what that was a gateway to was me basically figuring out what to do when I had no one around me. So I would end up, drawing, I'd end up playing Legos, I'd go on a bike ride, or I would knock on someone's door to go play. And the reason why I was telling the story is because, again, boredom is actually where creativity lives. That's where people figure things out when they have a moment to sit with themselves and think, okay, what can I do here? Or maybe I don't have anything to do there. Maybe I can read this. We've now lost the whole idea of being bored. Mm-hmm. And what's happened is we've replaced boredom with smartphones, iPads, technology.
Yeah.
And it's now it's basically breeds laziness and sedentariness, anxiety, depression, and it doesn't lend itself for any type of coping mechanism where you can soothe yourself anymore.
Right. Yeah, because the architecture of life is that you will be inherently hit with something that wasn't planned. Right? You're going to be challenged with something. You're going to have to overcome something. Things aren't going to go your way. it's just a part of life. But what you're talking about in this TED Talk and here is that if you don't have some skills to learn how to adapt within yourself and to find that strength within yourself, then it's almost like you become a victim of every time something doesn't go your way, right? And
I think what we're talking about is the lack of coping skills.
yeah.
And what we've lost in this generation is just that. People are not able to have coping mechanisms to deal with whatever challenges come to life.
Yeah.
And that's what I call coddle culture. And it's a lot of it is on the parent. It's not the child's fault. It's the parent's fault for not basically instilling the importance of failing, of building resilience, of truthfully figuring out things on your own. We tend to, as a culture now, it's considered gentle parenting. And this, by the way, it's not just in parenting, it's in like in adulthood, right? With what's happened is there's a wave of, these ideas of trigger warnings and safe spaces. And every emotion and every need has to be explained and talked about. And to me, and from what my experience is, and from you, by the way, too, when we were growing up, we didn't have that type of that gentleness, that kind of every little thing had to be overspoken about. There's a lot of research that talks about the idea of what, rumination, right? When kids now and adults, when they have a problem, they go seek therapy and then they stay in therapy for years on end. And what that does is actually makes you ruminate on your problems more so than if you would basically distract yourself with doing other things, like going for a walk, finding a hobby, building a community and socializing.
God forbid having a goal and creating some discipline and just doing it regardless.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Because the thing here too is, and which this bumps up into is the emotions as if they're real for everybody. Like emotions are the weather, right? They're coming and going. They're just a truth for a person, but they're not the truth, and if we're curtailing the world based on an emotion, we have a rudderless boat in the water because all of that's going to change all the time. And so this is where just because someone has an emotion doesn't mean that it's actually truthful. And at the same time, it's important to honor the emotion, but not let it dictate. Because it's like
that's
you
true.
You
that's
can
right.
you can be driving and be pissed off, and if you let your driving dictate you, then you're basically saying I have every right to be angry, and now just be emotional. And now all of this traffic needs to curtail to my emotions, as opposed to they're just an emotion having a wave, and you're not. And as children and as even adults, we know handfuls of people that emotion can get the best of us sometimes, and that's a tricky thing to put all of your truth into an emotion.
I think that's a great way of saying it. I think the truth is emotions are fluid, right? You're going to have times when you're happy, sad, anxious, elated. That's just human nature. But if you allow every emotion to dictate what you do, you can become paralyzed, right? And so, that's why your goal, you should not allow an emotion to supersede what your goal is.
Yeah.
But that's about also reframe and telling yourself and having that self-talk where this is just a moment in time, and this is not something that's going to this how I feel in this particular moment does not have to dictate what I do in 5 minutes, tomorrow, or the next day, because it is fluid. And I think what's happening a lot is we are not able to self-soothe because of what's considered what's considered to be PC.
Yeah. Well, we're autonomous, right? Mm-hmm. So we this is our inner landscape. No one knows what's going on inside of us. It's up to us to be sovereign within how we are handling ourselves. And going back to children, like if I look at my life, I certainly things weren't easy, just like they're not easy for life, right? There's no way I would take back the strains and the pains that I went through as a kid, because they created the very fabric of my ass-kicking ability.
Yeah. You know, that's 100% true.
And I do not want that changed. I want to find my own team sport competitiveness. I want to be at the time, if I was coddled by my dad and by the coach, I missed, and you said this great in your TED Talk, I miss such a massive opportunity to build an inner muscle that is gifting me today. You and I resonate on several levels, and one, we love to just like go after something. Your book, Bold, and like I resonate with that, but it's not because it's just something I want to do. It's because I went through hell of a struggle in many different parts of my life to go, I had to figure out my reasons for doing something. I had to go, why do I want to make this basketball team when all the odds are stacked against me? My father, before he passed away, recapitulated. He was sitting on a chair. I was sitting there. He recapitulated my life just spontaneously and saw he just laid out the resiliency that I demonstrated because of the pains and the struggles, right? And he said this and took me through my life. And he said it on the day that I was born, because I had a 50-50. I almost died, right? I was premature. Right. That set I'm fragile, I'm broken. So I had every opportunity to be a victim, right?
Right.
And if my parents were just going, oh, you're fine. And my mom definitely wanted to do that more than my dad.
Right.
My mom was, your allergies and da 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 da, and she wanted to do that.
Right. She's your mom.
Right. But my dad was the opposite. So somewhere in the middle, I figured it out, because my dad was like, discipline and like sit down and read something and figure it out and do that. And my mom was like, hey, It's
so true.
But and that's why I was excited to talk about this, because I think what you're talking about is so important. And I can only imagine as a mom, speaking of moms, you don't want your children, you don't want your friends, you don't want your loved ones, your partners, you don't want people to go through pain. So when you see them in pain, you want to take it away. But it's more of just like holding a space for them going through something, and obviously you don't want them to hurt themselves, but it's like letting people have the agency, because they have every bit of the universe's power in them, just like you and I.
I think having self-efficacy and feeling competent is so important for not just your own personal self-esteem, but for success over time and in the future. And I think a lot of times when people have things too easy growing up, you are eliminating their ability to feel confident and feel like they have that self-efficacy, because then they're not learning to figure things out, right? Like if you do everything for your kid, then you are literally robbing them of the feeling of competence. And competence breeds confidence.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel competent, then there's no way you're going to feel confident. And challenge is where I think resilience really grows, right? Like challenge. You know, you and I both, right? If I had, things never came easy for me. School never came easy for me. Nothing came easy for me. But it was because the fact that like I had to become, or I had to learn how to be resourceful in order to get anything that I wanted. And that to me, that feeling and becoming resourceful is the key component of why I've had success in my life in any area.
Right. That's your superpower now. And
that
from
is a superpower.
That came from your childhood doing that. And now today I can see you all the time using that skill.
You're right. Like nothing scares me to try. Like I will figure if there's a challenge now, I'll be like, okay, let me figure this out. Like if I get to A, then I'll get to B, and then how am I going to get to C, and I can ricochet to D. But like if everything was easy, if I grew up academically brilliant, and I grew up beautiful, and I grew up all these things, then that would have actually been that would have been actually detrimental to any success I have now, right? So like what I always think, I really believe that mediocrity is a superpower, because when you're mediocre or average, things are not going to come as easy as if you were just born brilliant and born beautiful. But in that mediocrity is where you will actually shine if you actually do the work.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. The other thing I would have to say is that a lot of times, you know, and I get it as a parent, and that's why I actually even did the TED Talk on this. I was going to do a totally different topic, right? And I decided to do this topic because it's like slapping me in the face constantly about how, especially living where I live in Los Angeles, that parents are literally taking away the challenge and the grit right from their kids' hands, you know, when they're doing their homework for them. And when
their science project.
And their science projects. Like basically it's parents competing against other parents for the gold star, right? And so because the kid's not doing the project,
right,
the parent's doing it.
So it's some sort of ego thing too, tied from the parents to the kids. You want them to succeed, but then you're doing it for them and robbing them of it. But you want your kid to shine, so you're ended up like it's right. So twisted.
It actually is because the parent. It's the ego of the parent.
Sure.
Because parents want to gloat. Look at my kid. Look how smart my kid is. Look how great of an athlete my parent is, or my kid is. Like parents are now getting mad at coaches because if they raise their voice or if they're making them work too hard. And so we are literally raising these fragile, frail children who, God forbid, have to work hard or have to struggle. Right. But it's in that struggle that they're actually going to become the strong, successful person that they should and want to be, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the And it's the, you know, we're talking about parenting, but it's the fabric of life.
Right. It's a microcosm for everything in life.
So you need to, because to going back to, if I expected everything to be given, I'd be so goddamn miserable right now, because who's going to just give you stuff?
Well, that's the thing. Entitlement is actually the worst quality, right?
Oh, it's just I'm running the other way as soon as I feel that.
Right. Like the feeling of entitlement, you know, and the issue is that's what we are also. That's what I'm really concerned about, right? Like if you are doing all these things and doing everything for your child, they will feel a sense of entitlement, and they're going to walk through life basically not learning or building a coping mechanism or a coping skill and expecting everything just to be easy and come to them. And, you know, it's not the fault of TikTok or Instagram. It's actually the fault of the parent who allows their child to be using these apps without any regulation, right?
So let's talk about that, because this is a big one, right?
Yeah.
It's like, people are given those like, it's alarming how early kids have these things in their hands.
Scary.
And without a doubt, the longer they don't use them, the more mentally balanced they are, the more confidence they have. But in the face of them complaining every day, so I want to talk, because you're in that space right now.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
And let me tell you.
So what's your plan? Like, what are you doing right now?
By the way, if I were to sit here and say I have it figured out, I'd be lying.
Yeah.
It's actually a struggle daily, because it's a constant fight and battle to negotiate with your child over these iPads and phones. And what I've learned, and speaking to every expert, is it's not a negotiation. It's actually a non-negotiable.
Right.
You as a parent have to learn to be a parent, as hard as it is, not their friend. And what we see and what I notice is it's now basically what's happening is the parent would prefer to be the friend to their child versus the parent. And it's not our job as a parent to make your kid happy all the time, but it is your job to make them mentally strong and basically competent. Mm-hmm. I'll always go back to the word competent because I think it's so crucial. Mm-hmm. You have to put guardrails on your children's devices and create situations where it's like the non-negotiable is like, my kids are 9 and 11. They are not allowed to be on social media, period, end of story. The other issue is just too much video games or too much of these other shows. The reality is those Disney shows and Nickelodeon shows are just as harmful. Mm-hmm. They're teaching terrible behavior. They are teaching sassiness to the kids, disrespect to the parents. We think that, we're actually doing a service because, it's rated G, so these shows are okay. But if you actually sit down and watch one of these Disney or Nickelodeon shows, you'd be like mortified of the lessons that your children is, what they're learning. Mm-hmm. That's the first part. The other part of this whole thing is, teach by example. As a role model, kids learn 70% more by watching you versus just listening to you. So if you want your kid to be active, you should be active. Mm-hmm. If you want your child to eat healthier and live a healthier lifestyle, guess what? You should do the same thing. Mm-hmm. If you're telling your kid to stay off of their phones, be cognizant that you are not on your phone 24/7 when your kid is around you. Right. These are all super difficult things, right? These are not easy things because life happens in real life happens. You got to work, you got to do these things. But if you could be cognizant and make some type of conscious effort to basically role model and do the things that you want your child to do, it will only help them later in life. And the reality is this, right? We talk in this industry, in social media and on all these things about how to be mentally strong, how to be tough, how to be successful, how to be a great entrepreneur, all of these raw hashtags. But guess what? It doesn't start when you're 25 years old. These behaviors, these habits are starting and should be started at a younger age. Mm-hmm. So it becomes ingrained in you, mm-hmm. right? Give your child a chore, for God's sakes. Mm. Do you know there's been so much research? Harvard did this crazy research, this study over spanned 75 years on kids who did chores versus kids who did not do chores. Mm. And the kids that did the chores were exponentially more successful on all walks of life later on, right? You're teaching your child, guess what you're teaching them? Competence. Mm-hmm. You're teaching them self-efficacy, that they can actually do something and follow through with something. These are foundational life skills that need to be ingrained and taught from a young age that will lead them to older life.
Yeah. Well, it's that power that can't be understated. Doing something and achieving something yourself. Mm-hmm. Like I went out, I worked hard, I made the basketball team, I started on the football team in spite being the small, like all, whatever the odds that were. And I also say, like, I was a younger brother, and my older brother kind of, more things came easier to him. And of course, he's 2 years older, and you're like, oh, he's like, oh my God, like, I can't keep up. But at the same time, trying to keep up with him was like also a superpower. And then you have your dad, and we had chores too. Like, and you hate them at the time. To your point earlier, the kids will fight back every step of the way. But later in life, not only are they going to be gifted by those skills, they're going to thank you for them.
Absolutely.
I thank my father, and of course my mom had many other qualities. That one wasn't so great, but I thank my father, like, for all of that stuff. So it's like with the end in mind, it's like, even though I can't imagine the fight of the children wanting to be on social, everyone else is on, like, everybody, right? It's like crack cocaine that they're just constantly like, I gotta be on this phone, I gotta have one, I don't fit in, and you know, it's that, it's again, you know, that video that I sent you today. It's like, well, sit down and talk about it. Don't just have a fight. Right? Like,
well, that's it. I know. I love the video you sent me. And you know what I loved about the video that you sent me was that I think it's really an important quality. Like what I did. I mean, again, this is just my experience. I never talked to my kids like a baby. I talked to them like I would talk to a friend of mine, like a friend or an adult, in the sense that not because I wanted to be I didn't want to be my kids' friends, right. But if my kid would come to me and ask me something or say something like outlandish, right? Like, you know, the video, like, I want blue hair today. It's not about the blue hair that they're talking to you about, right? It's, well, you need to get to the meat of the matter. Well, why do they want the blue hair? Is it because they feel like they don't fit in? And why I think it's important to have real conversations is because then you're creating a bond and you're connecting where they feel comfortable to tell you what's really going on. Right. But what I think is actually happening more so is that there's no conversation because the art of communication, the art of true friendship has been diminished into the cyber, on the internet. Yeah. Now, if you have 100 friends on social media, that's taking the place of having a real friend in real life. Right. They're trying to create. They're mastering the art of a selfie as opposed to the art of living. Right. And I think this is the big problem. I think technology has now superseded real conversation, real friendship, real life community. Mm-hmm. And it's very isolating. Mm-hmm. And so that's why anxiety is up, and that's why depression is up, and that's why the suicide rate is skyrocketing. Mm-hmm. And I feel there should be, I don't know where the pendulum will swing back, but I just feel it's getting worse and worse. And unless we as humans kind of put guardrails on ourselves to stop the insanity, we're just going to get further down that rabbit hole of loneliness and isolation.
Yeah, because, you can't make up literally one of the greatest things to our humanity and our health is community and connection. Mm-hmm. And that isn't superseded by social media. It is not. You have in physical proximation with community, with your friends, and having time with that is and that was another 75-year plus study that was like, what's the greatest effect on our human health? And that is community.
Yeah.
Right? And we are now racing in the other direction under this dopamine fixture of social media, and it's like there is no easy answer because the it's down the road quite a bit. But back to the kids.
But I will say something about that because both of us are very much in the health space, and the number one key to longevity is social connection.
Yeah.
Being lonely kills more people than smoking cigarettes, right? Than doing drugs. That's the number one epidemic. Like, to me, that is the pandemic that we're all facing, is loneliness. Yeah. People aren't dating anymore. People are not having real relationships. Yeah. They're texting. Right? They're in situationships. That's what it's called. It's called situationships because they're not in real relationships. They have these they have these hybrids because they're getting enough of that dopamine hit by just like texting each other or sending a picture and a selfie, because I think it's becoming scary for people to actually be together in real time and in real life. And so this is what's becoming this is becoming the evolution of what a relationship is, right? Men are in their basements playing video games and using AI and creating girlfriends for themselves. There's a spike in that right now. Did you not hear about this?
I mean, I've lightly, but I don't know anything about it.
Have you seen the movie Her? With Joaquin Phoenix?
Yeah.
And he created this this robot, her, as his girlfriend. Yeah. This was, how many years ago was that? Like 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, wild. It's here.
It's happening as we speak. Yeah. The amount of people who are using AI to create relationships and girlfriends as opposed to going out, they're not even using dating apps anymore. Do you know that dating apps, people using people who used to use dating apps, the amount of people on them have plummeted because the same people now are using AI to create exactly the version of the person that they want to be with.
But they're just talking virtually to
They're
them.
talking to them. I mean, listen, but this is my point.
Yeah.
It's easier to create an AI girlfriend than it is to go out there to a bar, to a restaurant, and go walk up to somebody and say, hey, I'm Jennifer, or I'm Darin, do you want to go for coffee? It's too scary.
Well, it also goes back to the other thing of human connection also brings up your stuff in your unconsciousness and that's another skill that's being lost, right?
It's all together.
Yeah, without reflecting, maybe some of your behavior needs to have upgraded, and some of that reflection comes by way of that real connection, but it's lost if you're not in any real relationships.
Well, you know what it's called? This is this is exactly why this is a microcosm, because at the same time, it's called with anything in life. If you want to get good at anything in life, you need to practice.
Yeah.
So if you're not practicing socializing and socialization, you're going to get really bad at it. Yeah. And so why our generation is good at it and we still do it, like I call you, you call me, is because that's what we did when we were kids. We called each other, right?
On a dial phone.
With a phone. Right now, by the way, when I call somebody who's under the age of 25, they are horrified. They're like, why are you calling me? Or they just don't answer the phone first. But actually, they don't answer the phone. Right. But if I call enough, they would answer the phone and they'd be annoyed at me that I'm even calling them, because they're not using the phone to actually make a phone call. They're just using the phone to text and to use social media. Period. End of story. Wow. And so people who I work with who are under the age of 25, it's completely frustrating and annoying, and I hate it. I'd rather hire a 60-year-old who actually answers a phone that I can talk to than hire a 21-year-old, because I just will never talk to them and things will get lost in communication. Right.
I mean, there was something that showed up on my feed, and it was like an AI app that you can plug in a conversation and it will give you the flirting verbiage to then send back to someone that you're texting with. Like
that's
it's
part
like,
of the
you're
AI.
just like going, oh my God. So you're not even coming up with it yourself. So again, you're stripping yourself away from a skill and of a vibe and of a thing. And you're using an app to talk to someone virtually that you're not even meeting. And it's like everything is punting. We're punting from reality.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about earlier.
And why are we so miserable?
This is what I'm talking about. The AI, when people respond to me now, do you know what I noticed? And I bet you if you look at this now, you'll see too. Sometimes when people like text me something or email me something that I thought if I say, send me like an RFP or send me like an overview of what you can do in X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Almost always now, I will get it back, and I know it's been Chat GPT because they keep the quotes in there. So you see that all they did was they plugged it into Chat GPT. They spit out the answer. They cut and pasted it to me, and that's how it happens. Like everybody is now just using Chat GPT for regular like jargon and verbiage. They're not even using their brain. Like we are basically numbing and weakening every muscle of our brain, of our social abilities, of everything, because we're just not thinking for ourselves anymore. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And now we're not even dating on our own. We're like getting Chat GPT to to create us a partner. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And then the robots will be coming.
Well, that's not. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's actually happening as we speak.
Yeah. There's companies.
I'm nervous that my kid is going to marry a robot. I mean, that can actually happen. Is it possible?
Of course, in this lifetime.
I was watching something on Bill Maher, and I don't know how this can possibly happen, but they wanted the Chat GPT girlfriend and the guy, he wanted to get married to her. It's crazy. I don't know. I mean, I don't even. Maybe that can happen in some far off world. I don't know. It's crazy.
So if you like, what's your prescription? Going back to, kids and maybe us and adults. What do you think? And I know you strive to do many of these things. What do you think is a way to kind of get back to the fabric, but at the same time acknowledge where we're at?
Okay, I think the first thing is allow your kid to be bored.
Yeah.
Allow your kid to be bored. You don't need to, your kid does not have to do something every hour on the hour. And I'm also somebody that I had to take a step back and stop overscheduling because I was an overscheduler, right? I was under this impression for a long time that if my kid is not doing something every hour on the hour, then they're going to go on their iPad. And that was my biggest fear in life, right? Like I didn't want that because I know all the ramifications. So I was overscheduling. And I then took a step back and realized, well, if I'm scheduling at hour to hour, then I'm not allowing them to be bored, which is exactly what I'm preaching. So I'm forcing myself to allow my kid some space and breathing room to actually figure things out on their own, which means then I have to be available and around to make sure that they are not jumping on a TV or an iPad. Like just how you would schedule your child to do basketball or baseball, schedule your kid to be bored for an hour and just sit there and think without technology, without a television, without anything. Let them figure out how they can, keep themselves occupied for an hour.
God forbid, read a book that you.
God forbid, read a book. Like schedule boredom is my first tip. Schedule yourself to be bored.
Right.
I think that's a really
it's just
good part.
Taking away all of the oversaturation of stuff.
It's eliminating. Like we always think that we need to add to be more successful, to be better, to get more. More is actually is actually not the answer. It's less.
Yeah.
So takeaway, that's the first thing. The other thing I would say is if you are going to schedule your child to do things, I think team sports is really important because I think learning the skill of, again, socializing, right? Discipline, playing well and nicely with others, and also learn to be a little bit competitive. Learn to, these are fundamental foundational life skills that will help you later on. So I think team sports is really, really important. I also think that the other big one that I think is really important, I think it doesn't really necessarily fall into the team sports, is overall fitness and exercise. I think fitness is a real microcosm for what you learn later in life. Taught you discipline, patience, actually self-esteem, right?
Totally.
It was a major confidence booster. As I got more physically strong, I became more mentally strong, and I saw myself literally morph in front of my very eyes, and that I can take control and ownership and agency of what happens to my body, with my body. And I think that is something that is remiss a lot. You think that fitness is only for when you're a certain age and above. I think learning it early on in life is the best skill that you can give your child, that you can give them for overall success in life.
And caring for this body that we have.
That's what I'm saying.
It's just like, hey, this is it. This is the thing. It's not you. It's your body. And you get to use it. But it requires some investment and understanding that it feels a certain way and likes to be taken care of. I mean, I too, like at 16 years old, man, when I picked up my first dumbbell and I really realized that I'm not just a victim of wherever I'm at in my body. I can actually, by what I eat, by picking up this iron. And then I got mentored by all these older guys because I was like open to just like teach me how to do this stuff. And I was like, and then all of a sudden in 2 years, I gained 50 pounds of muscle. And then And then all of a sudden you're like, it changes everything, but it's not necessarily the muscle. It's the journey along the way. It's this, for me, it was like that. I am doing something to change the trajectory of that earlier pattern that my body is weak, that I might die when I was born, like all of that stuff going, that's not true because I can do a lot.
Well, I think it also teaches you work ethic and doing things day in and day out. It may doesn't sound sexy, right? Like It's kind of, but doing those boring things that you think sound boring actually are the sexiest things you can do because of the outcome, right? And I think that once your body's in motion, you stay in motion. Once you're sedentary, it's much easier to stay sedentary, right? But if you're building that habit of movement really at a really young age, you will feel strange later on when you're not doing it. I feel weird when I don't work out.
Right.
But it took me a lot of day in, day out, over and over and over again of truly changing that neuroplasticity in my brain. Mm-hmm. But I also think if you really want to build social, self-esteem in a true way, not confidence, but real self-esteem, that's what from within, doing something for yourself every day, like working out, is the best elixir for that.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing that comes close, right? You can shop all day, you can do your hair all day, you can do your makeup all day, but when you feel physically fit and physically strong, there's nothing that compares to that, bar none.
Yeah. Plus, it's every marker possible biologically, chemically changes in a positive way when you
absolutely
work out. So it's like it's the, if you put it in a capsule, anyone on the list of benefits would blow your mind. And it's almost like you have to do it for people to just really realize how powerful it is.
Well, exercise is also the best antidepressant that money can buy.
Yeah.
Nothing in a pill will ever take the place of what exercise can do for you.
Yeah.
The endorphins, the dopamine is the best thing. For me, I regulate my mood by just basically getting my heart rate up and exercising and working out, right? It is the best anti-anxiety medication out there on the planet. Mm-hmm. And I think that for young adults and kids who are preteens and teenagers, if they are incorporating physical fitness, exercise daily, that will transcend their anxiety, their depression, all of their negative thoughts, all of those mental health issues would be diminished.
Yeah.
You can, I mean, like a lot of these people are getting over medicated with ADD and all these other mental health issues that parents are, in my opinion, are very quick to put their children on. Yeah. When exercise can really help, like tenfold that mental health issue before starting someone on medication.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like take care of some of the foundational stuff before you go to chemicals like that.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, it's so invaluable to, again, full circle to what you're saying before, the kids are watching you. And you're committed to working out. I remember I've been on the phone with you several times and you're like, I've been doing so much. I got to go work out. Like, I got to stop doing all this other stuff for other people. And you're like, I got to go work out.
100%. And by the way, it is the best cognitively, like what you get from we didn't even talk about the cognitive aspects of it, the acuteness, the focus, in terms of your brain power is turned on by just doing some exercise.
Yeah.
But I think that kids are small adults. So why should these things and these habits be only for adults?
Yeah.
They should be just as valuable for kids. Yeah. And that's why I decided to talk about it. Like, people say, well, you're not. What makes you a parenting expert? Well, I'm a parent. I mean, I got some kind of practice. I mean, that's the first part. Second of all, I get every expert on my podcast and I pick their brains. And quite frankly, we're all just doing the best we can. And it's about observing, it's trial and error. And it's about looking and seeing what's worked for other people.
It's also about common sense.
And by the way, common sense isn't so common, right? Some of the best psychiatrists in the world are the most fucked up, right? Yeah. It's like the cobbler doesn't have any shoes. I think that anybody can be an expert at anything if they are doing it day in and day out.
There's a funny situation that just reminded me of when I was doing my psychology class, right? And we'd do exercises, break down into counselor groups, and then we'd share in the big group. And this one girl, just always dramatic, and always had this big epiphany to share, and just like another thing. And she stood up again, and the professor was like, okay, so-and-so, I'll call her Jane, right? Jane, what's going on? Like, my childhood. He goes, can I stop you for a sec? Run around the room. She's like, what? It's like she's in the middle of her story. It's like, we'll get back to your story. Don't worry about it. Just take a run around the room. So she did. She just ran around this big room. She came back. I go, how you feeling? She goes, I feel pretty good. She goes, what was I talking about? Right? That thing alone of just moving your body and not being a victim to the emotion and the story and all of that stuff. We live in concert. So you're not saying exercise is going to cure you of, schizophrenia, but it's going to help. It's not,
totally
social media banning is not going to cure you of all of your ADD tendencies, but it's going to help. Drinking some water, it's going to help. Eating some good food, going to help. Like all of this stuff, it's just all of this stuff is going to help. And we need to have these conversations about, especially around the kids. And
that's a great point, right? Because I think that everyone's looking for this panacea, right? This like, oh, this is the magic pill to cure this and to cure that. I think that's a really wonderful thing to say, because there's no such thing as a magic pill for anything in life.
Right.
But there are things that you can do that will make things a little bit easier and maybe a little bit better, right? And that's what it's about, right? It's not about having unrealistic expectations and thinking if I do X and Y, then I'm going to have the perfect child. Or if I do X and Y, I'm going to have the perfect body. You know, like, I think we have to be more forgiving to that and realize that we are just doing the best we can with the information and with the knowledge we have. But then you have to actually execute on that information and knowledge, right? And try to do the best you can.
Yeah, take some action. Well, this is an awesome subject, and I love that as a mom you're talking about it, and you were bold enough to speak to this and do your TED Talk. So where can people find more out about
the TED Talk?
You and the
they
TED.
Can watch the TED Talk and tell me what they think. They can find it on, I think, YouTube.
Yeah.
It's called, I think it's like The Secret to Raising Mentally Strong Kids in a Fragile World. That's what it's called. And they can find me on Instagram, The Real Jen Cohen.
The Real Jen
The
Cohen.
Real Jen Cohen. And again, these are just things that are just not even for kids. It's for like anybody who, again, like I said earlier, common sense sometimes isn't that common, or maybe who just needs like a reminder of it's like, you know, just doing a little bit more of this or a little less of that can make an incremental or a big change by doing it daily.
Big time. And added up over time, it does make big changes.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Darin, for having me on your show.
Thank you, Jennifer, for making it on my show.
Oh, thank
You've
you.
made my show that much better.
Oh my gosh, I appreciate that. You're just a doll. And you know what's really funny? As we're talking about this, you live in a yurt. So, you know, who are you socializing with? The dogs?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Does that count?
Of course it counts. You're definitely healthier with animals around.
For sure, healthier with animals.
But I have connective tissue everywhere.
Yeah.
I see guys that I work out with every day.
Right, you do that.
I have
That's
my
right.
men's group, and then I'm selective at who I hang out with. I'm careful of my energy.
What I was gonna say is part of like what makes you so unique and special is that you are in real life. Truly what you see is what you get. You seem to be the most balanced person I know. And no, it's true. And I'm not just saying this because we're on a podcast. You can even cut it if you want. I don't care. But whatever you're doing, you should bottle that. Because if anybody is doing the right things to have a good outcome, you're the one who's doing it, right?
Super life.
Super life. I mean, you really are doing everything. Like, you're not extreme in anything, like in your exercise, you're extreme in like your fatal conveniences of what you believe in, your integrity.
But that also has been over time.
Right.
Right.
But your integrity is so in check. And I think that plays a big thing, a big part in it too, right? Like knowing who you are, being true to who you are, is such an integral part of, I think, of just overall happiness and being like following your North Star, which you do so well. I admire you for it because I think it's really hard.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
It takes practice.
Practice makes progress.
Progress makes dreams. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. How long was that? That was like no time.